Rosh Hashanah is the start of a new year filled with promise and possibilities. And yet here we are again reading the most challenging text in the entire Torah. We Jews know how to have a good time. The text says, "Take your son, your favored one, the one you love, Isaac. Go to the land of Moriah and raise him up as an offering." Each year we grapple with Abraham's willingness to comply with this chilling command. How could the father of the Jewish people even entertain the notion of sacrificing his son? In the text's short 13 verses, we learn about Abraham's actions and conversations, but Isaac's voice is seldom heard. Even though Isaac's life hangs in the balance, he speaks only once to voice that concern. "Here is the firestone and the wood," he says, "but where is the sheep for the burnt offering?" "It is God who will see to the sheep," comes Abraham's reply, as if Isaac's concerns are imagined. Abraham chooses to tell Isaac, and perhaps himself as well, that everything is exactly as it should be, that everything is okay. As they approach the mountain's peak, Isaac remains silent despite noticing the sheep's absence. Abraham, in turn, says nothing as well, even as he lays Isaac on the altar, ties him down, and even grips his knife. They go through the motions, perhaps silently praying for an intervention, and it is then at the last second when the messengers call out, will the promises made to Abraham regarding his offspring now be broken? The knife is at his throat. How long will you wait? The binding of Isaac, it grips at our heartstrings as we try to reconcile the compassionate and generous Abraham that we know with the Abraham of this story. How can the father of Judaism risk the life of his son? Judaism teaches that children are our guarantors, that we were blessed to receive the Torah itself only for their sake. It reminds us that we have an obligation to make life better for future generations. How then do we come to terms with Abraham placing his son in such danger? How do we understand this Torah portion, which we read every Rosh Hashanah? Shouldn't we aspire to something better? In Torah study, students sometimes ask why we hold on to challenging texts. Even though child sacrifice was common millennia ago, and this, in fact, was a polemic against it, we have thankfully moved away from such practices. Can't we just put these texts aside and move on? But then, as we read the text, we're often all blown away by how relevant they actually remain. The beauty of Torah is that it is as flawed as we are. It mirrors our complexity, our challenges, and our moral callings. Today, none of us are being asked to place our children on an altar, but there are many ways in which we, like Abraham, are complacent in sacrificing the health of our children. There is little doubt that future generations are actually more at risk than we are. And that's true for a number of reasons, but today I will focus on one that's close to my heart, which is climate change. Right now we know in Cuba and Florida, they're bracing for Hurricane Ian. The Philippines are currently being hit by Typhoon Nora, and Canadians are cleaning up after Hurricane Fiona. Pakistan continues to suffer from flooding that left 1/3 of the country underwater. And South Africa is recovering from terrible mudslides. After a summer of record-breaking heat domes, new vocabulary word for all of us, in Europe and Asia and Africa and North America, rivers and water basins are emptying. Wildfire season is well underway, and carbon dioxide levels are the highest they have been in recorded history. Almost every child on our planet is exposed to an environmental hazard, and 1 billion children are currently at an extreme risk of the impacts of climate change. The global think tank, IEP, estimates that the crisis will cause the displacement of 1.2 billion people by 2050. Climate change isn't something only being felt by others across the world. We felt it when Camp Newman burnt down. We're reminded of it when family members and friends are forced to evacuate their homes, and every time the sky fills with apocalyptic shades. We feel it on our faces and in our lungs. The evidence is all around us. Many of us in this room feel passionate about our responsibility to take care of our environment. We understand the implications of global warming. We recycle and compost. We drive electric vehicles and try to reduce our carbon footprint and try to eat sustainably. We internalize Ecclesiastes' Rabbi when it calls that we take care of this world, because if we destroy it, there is no one to take care of it after us. And yet we know our actions aren't enough. We know the burden on future generations is great. And young people, they know it too. Overwhelming teens and young adults feel that the government is failing them and not taking their concerns seriously. A recent survey of over 10,000 young adults across the world, 84% said that they are very worried about the future. More than half reported feeling sad and anxious and angry and powerless in the face of climate change. The realities of climate change alongside governmental failures to act create chronic, long-term stressors. Global warming is keeping our children up at night. I can say that from experience. Perhaps it's keeping us up as well. Youth climate activists throughout the world are demanding more. As one 16-year-old put it, it's different for young people. For us, the destruction of the planet is personal. For more than 30 years, the science has been clear, Greta Thunberg chastised the United Nations. And you come here saying that you're doing enough when the politics and solutions needed are still nowhere in sight? You say you understand the urgency. But no matter how sad and angry I am, I do not want to believe that, because if you really understood the situation and kept on failing to act, then you would be evil, and that I refuse to believe. What's so remarkable about these young leaders is that they do not allow themselves to be lulled into complacency. They refuse to do nothing in the face of this truly overwhelming crisis. Greta, like her fellow youth climate activists, turn their anger and anxiety into action. They do what Abraham did not. They speak up. Their words serve as a wake-up call, a shofar blast calling for swift action. Its cries are as relentless as global warming itself. As Rabbi Joshua Lesser explains, as painful as Greta's words are, people appreciated the courageous act of someone piercing the denial and delivering the unvarnished truth. Every good prophet from Isaiah to Heschel to our most recent Greta strives to wake us up from the dangers of denial and calls us to wake up to the truth of our own agency. Being present to our reality and its full discomfort is the only way to claim the power we have. And we often have greater agency and ability than we realize. Perhaps all those years ago, Abraham didn't speak up because he didn't realize the power of his voice. Perhaps he didn't speak up because the situation felt so overwhelming he couldn't come up with the words to speak. The binding of Isaac, it ends with a miracle. Abraham raises his eyes to find a ram caught in the thicket. And Abraham instinctively knows that God has created this miracle. Abraham is meant to sacrifice the ram in Isaac's place. Elsewhere in the Torah, when Ishmael is dying of thirst, God creates a different miracle, a well of water with which to revive him. The Torah is full of these miracles and interventions, without which the future would have been bleak. When it comes to climate change, however, we can expect no miracles. There is no ram caught in the thicket or clear brook of water that is just waiting for us. We are the messengers. The children of the world are waiting. The knife is at their throat, and it is up to us to speak out. As we celebrate the birthday of the world today, let us pledge to protect it. And we know that there is already some progress being made. Recently, the Inflation Reduction Act is put in place to help us transition to zero-emission economy and to develop green jobs. A recently passed California bill will reduce state oil consumption and pollution in favor of clean energy. But we know that these measures aren't enough. We know that there is so much more to do. There's a reason that our rabbis teach that we must pray in a room with windows. Our prayers mean little unless we use them to connect with the plight of others, unless we're active in our engagement of this world, and we leave our prayer feeling inspired to act. On Rosh Hashanah, we read the story of Abraham who didn't use his voice against injustice, but we, awakened by the shofar blast, are called to raise ours. We are called to offer new prayers, such as the newly inspired Grand Aleinu for the burning West. Janice Steinberg writes, "If we weep, if we sob, wail, keen every one of us, tears coursing down millions of faces, can we put out the fires? If we mourn together, rend our garments, lament, howl, grieve the loss of each woodpecker, egret, Steller's jay, squirrel, bear, deer, chipmunk, fox, raccoon, lizard, banana slug, and beetle, every redwood. If anguish shakes us so hard we can't stand and drop to our knees, we fall to our bellies prostrate as in the Grand Aleinu prayer, proclaiming God's kingship. And near the conclusion of the prayer service, if face down on the seared earth, we open our lips to declare it's up to us to mend the broken world, and if our mouths fill with ash, would that be a new beginning, God? Could we save the blazing forests with the rain of our repentance? I pray we can. But it's only possible if we use our agency and raise our voices. It's only possible if we not only curb our consumption, but also demand more of those in power. In the face of a crisis of this magnitude, it is easy to get discouraged and overwhelmed. Even God anticipated that sometimes we would feel in over our heads. At this moment, we are consoled by God's words from the end of Deuteronomy. The instruction I place upon you this day is not too baffling for you, nor is it beyond your reach, God says. It is not in the heavens that you shall say, who among us shall go up to the heavens and get it for us and impart it to us that we observe it? Neither is it beyond the sea that you shall say, who among us can cross to the other side of the sea and get it for us and impart it to us that we observe it. No, the thing is very close to you, in your mouth and in your heart to observe. None of us can battle global warming and climate change alone, but there is much that each of us can do. As Pirkei Avot reminds us, it's not up to us to complete the work, but each of us has a role to play. If we wish to do what Abraham could not and protect the next generations, our concern must be expressed not symbolically, but literally, not only publicly, but also privately, noted Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel. Not only occasionally, but regularly. What we need is the involvement of every one of us as individuals. Along the way, we may at times, like our youth, be distraught. We may feel downcast and cynical that our actions or our one voice cannot do much of anything. When we feel this way, I think of a teaching by my colleague, Rabbi Deborah Robbins. She explains the connection between tikva, hope, and kav, thread. These two disparate words share a Hebrew root, she teaches. When we are in need of hope, let us hold on to the small threads of progress. Let us take heart in the work that has been done and the concerns being expressed in our collective desire to do something about it. And there is something you can do about it. Each year, the Religious Action Center in California picks a few different issues on which to focus lobbying efforts. In an unprecedented move, they decided to create not a one-year campaign, but a 3-year campaign on climate justice. There will be a Los Angeles meeting on this topic on January 29th, and I hope you choose to join this effort along with me. The challenge is great, but we have known great challenges before. We are resilient and strong, willing to stand up for justice, especially when it concerns future generations. As Moses reached the end of his life, he uttered 2 words that garnered a whole lot of attention because they were so out of character. Re'eh anochi, Moses said, look at me. As Maimonides later explained, Moses was not being haughty or attention-seeking in saying these words. On the contrary, he was asking the Jewish community to see his humanity. Take a good look at me. There is nothing special about me, he was saying. All I accomplished, you can as well. If we had told young Moses that he would lead the people out of slavery to the promised land, he never would have believed that to have been possible. And yet he became a messenger of God because he heeded that call. Today, we are God's messengers. But unlike Moses, we are not being called alone. We have one another. This Rosh Hashanah, let us learn from Abraham's mistakes. Isaac is waiting. God is calling us to action.